In a small monastery in the mountains, a young monk named Rio was sitting under a tree, watching the constant flow of the river passing nearby. His face reflected a mix of doubts and longing. He had come to the monastery hoping to find answers to the questions that tormented him, but as time passed, his mind remained restless. One of the elder monks, Zeno, approached him silently, his eyes filled with wisdom. Without saying a word, he sat beside Rio and also watched the river. The water flowed unhurriedly, touching the stones, jumping over them, but always moving forward. After a long while, Rio broke the silence, speaking with a tense voice. "Master Zeno, sometimes I feel like my life is like this river. I want everything to move quickly, but I feel trapped, as if I'm waiting for something that never comes. How can I find peace?" Zeno looked at the young man calmly and, without rushing, replied, "Peace is not found in speed, nor in control. Peace is in the process, in accepting what flows within you and around you. Look at the river, Rio. It doesn't force its course, it simply flows, trusting the path ahead. Life is like that river. Only when you learn to trust the process, the flow of life, will you find the peace you seek." Rio, thoughtful, looked at the river again. The elder's words resonated in his heart. Could he truly trust the process of life? The silence between them stretched, and the young man, without words, continued watching the water, feeling that something was beginning to change within him. In the following days, Rio tried to put Zeno's words into practice, but the restlessness remained in his heart. He woke up each morning with the same feeling that something was missing, that peace was a distant and unattainable concept. Every time he sat down to meditate, his mind filled with anxious thoughts, as if time was slipping through his fingers. One day, Zeno invited him to walk through the forest surrounding the monastery. As they walked, the elder stopped by a moss-covered rock and pointed to a small flower growing in the shade. "Look at this flower," Zeno said. "Often, people fail to notice the simplest wonders because they are too focused on the future or on what they lack. This flower doesn't struggle, it doesn't rush its growth. It simply grows at its own pace, trusting that the right time will come." Rio observed the small and delicate flower, which seemed to shine despite the shadow surrounding it. Something within him began to understand the lesson, though doubts still crept in. "But Master, what if the right time never comes? How can we know if we are truly following the right path?" Zeno smiled and, with a slow gesture, touched the rock next to the flower. "The right path is not a fixed destination, Rio. The process is the path. The flower doesn't worry about becoming a tree, nor does the river worry about becoming the sea. Every moment is an essential part of the whole. Trust in what is just as it is. Every step, every breath, every thought has its place in the process." Rio fell silent. Something in Zeno's words echoed in his heart. Perhaps, in his eagerness to find immediate answers, he had not allowed life itself to show him the way. As they returned to the monastery, a sense of calm seemed to have touched his being. However, deep down, he knew his journey was only just beginning. The days passed, and Rio began to experience a gradual change. He no longer rushed so much, nor forced himself to find immediate answers. However, doubts still lurked in his mind, especially during the loneliest hours of the night, when the stillness of the monastery enveloped him completely. Sometimes he found himself wondering if there was really something he should be doing to speed up his spiritual growth. One afternoon, while walking alone in the monastery garden, Rio stopped in front of a cherry blossom tree in full bloom. The pink flowers gently fell to the ground, carried by a soft breeze. Rio gazed at the flowers, so beautiful and fleeting, and thought about the passage of time. Could that not be the true essence of life? the beauty in the transient. Suddenly, Zeno appeared beside him, as if he had been watching from afar. Without a word, he looked at the fallen flowers and then at Rio. "Do you see how the flowers fall without fear?" asked the elder. Rio nodded, watching as some flowers glided gently through the air, while others rested on the ground, covering the garden with a pink carpet. The flower does not cling to the tree, nor does it try to resist the wind. It simply flows with what is happening. It doesn't stop to lament what could have been, nor to fear what will come. Everything is part of the process. Rio felt something deep begin to emerge within him. The fear of the future, of making wrong decisions, of the suffering that might come, seemed to fade with the simple observation of that natural cycle. "But, Master, what if I am not able to flow like the flower? What if my doubts and fears trap me along the way?" Zeno looked at him calmly. "The fears are part of the process, Rio. You cannot avoid them or suppress them. Instead, you can learn to observe them without identifying with them. Just as the flowers fall, the fears will also come and go. What matters is how you choose to relate to them. Don't rush to get rid of them. Let them arise and disappear at their own pace. Life is a continuous process of acceptance, not of control." Rio felt a new understanding beginning to grow inside him. It was no longer necessary to struggle against his thoughts, nor to force his peace. He only had to allow everything to come when it was meant to come. Slowly, he began to understand that trusting the process of life meant accepting the moment as it is, without haste and without resistance. As the evening fell, Rio sat again in silence, watching the garden covered in fallen flowers, feeling that the path he sought was already before him, even though he could not yet see it clearly. Spring advanced, and with it, time seemed to blur for Rio. He found himself more at peace than before, but there were still moments when old worries returned to his mind. At times, he felt as if he were wasting time, as if his efforts to understand were in vain. In those moments, Zeno was always nearby, watching in silence, as if he knew when the young man needed words of comfort. One afternoon, while Rio was sweeping the monastery courtyard, the elder approached and sat beside him. The conversation began in a calm manner, without expectations, as always. "Master, sometimes I feel like time is slipping away from me. In the past, I used to think that everything that happened had a clear purpose, a direction. Now everything seems out of control. How can I know if I'm moving forward correctly?" Zeno looked at the clouds slowly drifting across the sky, then turned his gaze back to Rio. "Do you know how plants grow?" he asked calmly. Rio stopped for a moment, puzzled by the question. "They grow slowly. A seed becomes a tree, but never immediately." "Exactly," Zeno replied. "Do you think a seed worries about whether it is growing fast or slow, or if it's taking the right path? No, it simply grows because it is designed to do so. Nature is not in a hurry because it knows that the process is more important than the result." Rio reflected on the master's words. Something resonated in his heart, but doubt still lingered. And what happens when the tree doesn't grow as we expected, or when the seasons change unexpectedly? Zeno smiled gently. "Sometimes, the seasons change when we least expect it, and the tree may face strong winds or harsh winters. But that's part of its process, part of its transformation. Not everything that seems adverse is truly an obstacle. Often, what appears to be an interruption in the path is simply an opportunity for growth, though we may not see it at the time." Rio lowered his gaze, feeling a weight begin to lift from his shoulders. He had sought answers in all the wrong places, in speed and control. But now he understood that true wisdom lay in patience, in allowing things to happen at their own pace. "So, I shouldn't worry about the future?" he asked, still searching for a deeper clarity. Zeno stood slowly, looking at the horizon. Worrying about the future is like looking at the river and expecting the waters not to change. The future is uncertain, but that doesn't mean you should fear it. If you learn to trust the process, the future will come when it's ready, and when it does, you will be ready too. Life doesn't need to be rushed. Flow, and what is meant for you will arrive in its time. Rio nodded slowly, feeling how those words settled in his heart. From that day on, his focus began to shift. He no longer sought quick answers nor rushed to find peace. Instead, he dedicated himself to being present in every moment, trusting that the process of life, with all its uncertainties and challenges, was in itself the answer he had been seeking. As the weeks passed, Rio began to see the fruits of his inner change. Each day brought with it a new lesson, a new opportunity to deepen his understanding of the process of life. However, there were still moments when he felt that the answers slipped just out of his reach, as if he were searching for something intangible. One morning, as he walked towards the monastery pond, Rio stopped when he saw a small frog leaping from one rock to another, with graceful and fluid movements. The frog, seemingly without a care, jumped effortlessly, enjoying each moment, the here and now. Watching, Rio felt once again the unrest of doubt. How can the frog leap so easily? He thought. How can I learn to flow so naturally? At that precise moment, Zeno appeared beside him, as if he had read his thoughts. Rio, said the elder with no preamble, do you see how the frog doesn't worry about the next leap? She simply jumps, trusting that the next movement will come naturally. Each leap is an expression of her being, without doubt or fear, and so should be your life. The process does not require force or control, only a full surrender to the present moment. Rio watched the frog with renewed admiration, and a sense of calm began to fill his being. But, Master, sometimes I feel like life demands more from me, as if every decision were crucial, as if every movement depended on something greater, on a purpose I still don't understand. Zeno smiled, and his voice was soft, almost a whisper. The mistake is thinking that every movement must have a grand purpose. Life doesn't always seek deep or transcendental answers. Sometimes the purpose is in the act itself, in the leap, in the breath. It's the process that gives shape to the purpose, not the other way around. By letting life flow, without trying to force it, you'll discover that each step, each moment, has its own meaning. Rio remained silent, contemplating the frog that, without any effort, gracefully leaped from side to side. Something in Zeno's words resonated in his heart. He was beginning to understand that it wasn't necessary to struggle to find a purpose, that life itself, in its natural flow, already brought with it everything he needed. So, should I let go of the idea of having everything under control? Rio asked, still with some doubt. Zeno nodded slowly. Control is an illusion, Rio. True power lies in letting go, in surrendering to the present moment. By doing so, you align with the flow of life, and everything will come when it is meant to come, without you having to do anything more than be present and be who you are. Rio felt a deep peace beginning to open in his heart. For the first time, he understood that the true process of life was not a race or constant effort. It was a gentle flow, a letting go without resistance. With this understanding, he began to walk once again along the monastery path, but this time with lightness in his soul, knowing that, just like the frog, he could leap with confidence and without fear, knowing that each leap was part of something much bigger than himself. Time continued its course, and with each passing day, Rio found himself more at peace with himself and with the world around him. However, one afternoon, while meditating in the garden, a sense of unease once again invaded his mind. Although he deeply understood Zeno's teachings, sometimes he wondered if he was missing something important by not being as committed to goals and achievements as he had been in his former life. A gentle breeze moved the leaves of the trees, and the sun began to set, bathing everything in a golden light. At that moment, Zeno approached him and sat silently beside him. The elder, with his usual calm, looked at Rio and then toward the horizon. "Master," Rio began with some sorrow, "sometimes I feel like my life lacks direction. I've learned to flow, to trust the process, but am I just avoiding action, the responsibility of seeking something more? Am I missing something important?" Zeno looked at him with his calm eyes and, with a slight smile, said, "Rio, the act of trusting the process of life does not mean you should stop acting. Action is part of the process. However, it is important that you do not see it as a means to reach a distant end, but as an expression of your being in this moment. It's not about rushing toward the future, but acting with full presence, knowing that each step is enough." Rio furrowed his brow, trying to understand. "So I shouldn't worry about the goals I haven't achieved yet?" Zeno gently shook his head. "Goals are just a part of life, not life itself. If you focus only on them, you may miss the most important thing, the present. If every step you take is infused with presence, without the burden of expectations, you will see that life itself will guide you toward what you need, without you having to force anything." Rio closed his eyes for a moment, letting Zeno's words settle in his mind. When he opened them, he felt a sense of liberation. He had lived with the constant pressure of achieving a great and clear purpose, but now he understood that purpose was not something that could be sought in the future. The purpose was already in the way he lived, in every action he took, in every breath he breathed. Zeno, seeing the change in Rio, continued with his soft but profound voice, "Life is not a problem to solve. It's not a race to win. It's a constant process of becoming who you already are. When you understand this, every action, no matter how small, will be enough, because it will be your action, and it will be aligned with the natural flow of life." Rio remained silent, looking at the horizon as the sun slowly disappeared behind the mountains. For the first time, he felt a complete acceptance of his life as it was. He no longer needed to have all the answers, nor pressure himself to achieve goals he didn't fully understand. He simply had to keep living with full confidence in the process. That night, as he lay down to sleep, Rio felt at peace. The process of life no longer seemed uncertain or frightening. Now, he understood that the true journey was a journey to the heart, and that flowing with life without forcing it was itself the greatest purpose he could follow. The peace he had sought for so long was within him, in every moment he lived. Everything was part of the process. As the days slid by gently like the waters of a river, Rio experienced moments of profound clarity. He no longer saw himself as an eager seeker, but as someone who had learned to listen to the whisper of life around him. His days were no longer filled with urgent goals or unanswered questions. Now he felt part of something much greater, flowing effortlessly, accepting everything as it came. However, one morning, during a solitary walk through the forest, Rio found himself facing a challenge he had not anticipated. A tree that had fallen blocked the path, and it seemed impossible to continue without navigating some kind of obstacle. For a moment, he felt he should turn back, but something inside him urged him to look closer. The fallen tree was not just an obstacle, it was an opportunity. Rio observed how the tree's roots intertwined with the stones and the earth, forming a new landscape. Instead of seeing the tree as something that stopped him, he began to see it as part of the process, something that had fallen naturally, leaving space for something new that might emerge. At that moment, Zeno appeared behind him, as if he had sensed the need to be there. "Master," Rio said, pointing to the tree, "sometimes I feel like life puts obstacles in my way to test my patience. Why do we have to face challenges?" Zeno approached the fallen tree and gently touched its roots. Rio, obstacles are not actually enemies. They are disguised teachers. Life doesn't give you challenges to stop you, but to help you grow. When you face something that seems impossible, what you're really doing is adapting, transforming. The tree has fallen, but its roots are still alive, creating new forms of life. That's how life works. When something closes, there is always something new ready to open. Rio looked at the tree in a different way now. Instead of seeing it as an end, he saw it as a natural part of the process, something that contributed to the eternal flow of life. It wasn't about avoiding the obstacle, but embracing it, learning to flow with it. But what if I don't know how to face these challenges? What if I feel lost when I encounter them? Zeno smiled warmly, as if he already knew the answer. When you feel lost, just remember this. You don't always need to know the next step. Life doesn't ask you to know everything. What it asks is that you trust. Every step you take, even if it seems uncertain, is part of the process. Life doesn't require you to be perfect, only to be sincere in your walk. If you move forward with an open heart, the path will be revealed when you're ready to see it. Rio closed his eyes and took a deep breath, feeling how his thoughts dissolved, leaving only the certainty that he was not alone on his path. The fallen tree was not an obstacle, but a sign that sometimes changes in life are inevitable. And the most important thing was how he chose to respond to those changes. With a new serenity in his heart, Rio bent down and began to walk around the tree, finding a new path, a path that revealed itself only because he had learned to trust in what life offered him. When he reached the end of the path, he felt he had taken one more step toward a deeper understanding of himself and the world. He no longer needed to have all the answers. The only thing he truly needed was to trust in the process of life as it was. Life, like the river, would continue to flow, and Rio, like the water, flowed with it. The sun began to set on the horizon, tinting the sky with a soft and warm orange. As Rio sat atop a hill, gazing at the landscape that stretched before him. He had arrived there after a long day of walks and meditations, and at last, in his heart, there was something of which he was sure. Life, with all its trials and difficulties, was not something to be feared or controlled, but something to be fully experienced. The wind caressed his face, and for a moment, he felt as if the entire universe was breathing with him. Each breath was a reminder of his connection to the infinite flow of life. In silence, he contemplated all he had learned during his time at the monastery. The teachings of Zeno, the wisdom of the changing seasons, the flowing river, and the falling flowers. Zeno appeared beside him without warning, as though he had always been there. He sat next to him, also watching the sunset. "Master," Rio said, his voice calm but filled with gratitude. "I have learned so much, but I still feel there is something more to understand. Sometimes I wonder if, deep down, I am afraid of fully letting go and flowing with life." Zeno looked at him in silence for a moment, and then spoke with deep calm, as if every word was imbued with the experience of a lifetime. "Fear is part of the process, Rio. We all feel fear when we face the unknown. But fear should not be an obstacle. It should be an invitation. Every time you feel fear, it is a sign that something inside you is ready to grow, to evolve. Life will never ask you to be perfect. It only asks that you be sincere in your walk, and that includes accepting your fears. When you learn to accept what you feel without resistance, you will discover that fear has no power over you." Rio closed his eyes, absorbing his words. As he listened, he realized that the fear he felt was not something to avoid, but something to understand. Every time he felt insecure, it was just an invitation to trust more deeply in the process, to surrender more fully to the moment. "But, Master, how will I know when I'm on the right path? How will I know if I'm truly trusting the process of life?" Zeno smiled, with a look full of understanding and peace. The right path is not something that can be measured or defined in advance. The right path is simply the one you follow, step by step, with an open heart and a calm mind. It's not about knowing where you're going, but about being present where you are. Every moment, every action, every thought has its place in the great process. The path is not a destination you reach, but a journey you live with full awareness. Rio nodded, feeling how these words resonated deeply within him. The path was not something to be rushed or understood logically, but something to be simply lived with authenticity, without fear of the uncertain future. There was no need to search for the answer because the answer was already in the very process of living. With a sense of peace filling his being, Rio stood up from the hill, feeling that there were no more doubts holding him back. Life, with all its mystery and beauty, was a gift he could embrace without fear, flowing with it like water finding its way between the stones. And so, with a light heart full of gratitude, Rio walked toward the horizon, knowing that every step, no matter how uncertain, was part of the perfect process of life. He didn't need to have "Why en esa confianza, encontró su libertad."